The morning mist clung to the grounds of Windsor Castle as Senior Royal Guard Captain James Morrison made his routine patrol through the royal stables. For 23 years he had walked these same paths, protecting the monarchy with unwavering dedication. His weathered hands traced the familiar wooden gates as he checked each stall, ensuring the precious royal horses were safe and secure. Morrison paused at the fourth stall, where a magnificent chestnut mare named Duchess stood quietly munching hay. This wasn't just any horse. Duchess had been Queen Elizabeth's most beloved companion, a gift from the Canadian government that had captured the late monarch's heart completely. The Queen had ridden Duchess almost daily during her final years, finding peace and joy in their quiet moments together across the castle grounds. The bond between the Queen and Duchess had been extraordinary to witness. Morrison remembered countless mornings when he would see the elderly monarch speaking softly to the mare, sharing secrets that only they understood. Duchess seemed to sense the Queen's moods, offering gentle nuzzles when times were difficult and spirited gallops when celebration was in order. Even after the Queen's passing, Duchess appeared to wait for her return, often looking toward the castle with expectant eyes. Morrison had been personally assigned by the Queen herself to ensure Duchess received the finest care possible. It was more than a duty. It was a sacred promise made to a dying monarch who worried about leaving her cherished friend behind. The Queen had made Morrison swear that Duchess would remain at Windsor, living out her days in the comfort and dignity she deserved as a royal companion. Recent changes in the royal household had Morrison feeling uneasy. Since King Charles and Queen Camilla had taken residence, many traditions were being questioned and altered. Staff members whispered about significant changes coming to the stables, and Morrison noticed unfamiliar visitors examining the horses with calculating eyes. Something was stirring and his protective instincts were on high alert. That particular morning felt different. Morrison sensed tension in the air as he completed his rounds. Royal staff members seemed nervous, avoiding direct eye contact and speaking in hushed tones. Even the horses appeared restless, as if they too could feel the approaching storm that would shake the very foundations of royal tradition. As Morrison prepared to leave the stables, he noticed a black sedan pulling up to the main entrance. Through the vehicle's tinted windows, he caught a glimpse of Queen Camilla stepping out, followed by a young man he recognized as her son, Tom Parker Bowles. Their body language suggested serious business, and Morrison's experienced instincts told him this visit would change everything he had worked to protect. The weight of his promise to the late Queen pressed heavily on Morrison's shoulders as he watched the pair disappear into the castle. Little did he know that within hours his loyalty and courage would be tested in ways he never imagined possible. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the halls of Windsor Castle and challenge the very nature of royal protocol. Morrison returned to his quarters, unaware that this would be the last peaceful moment he would experience for quite some time. Forces were already in motion that would transform him from a quiet guardian into an unlikely hero standing against the most powerful people in Britain. The fate of Duchess and Morrison's own future hung in the balance as the royal drama began to unfold. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the castle courtyard when Morrison received an urgent summons to the Queen's private study. His boots echoed against the marble floors as he made his way through corridors lined with centuries of royal portraits. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of history itself was pressing down upon him. Queen Camilla sat behind an ornate mahogany desk, her expression stern and businesslike. Beside her stood Tom Parker Bowles, fidgeting with what appeared to be official documents. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, and Morrison immediately sensed that this meeting would challenge everything he believed about his role as protector of royal traditions. "Captain Morrison," Camilla began, her voice carrying the authority of her new position, "we need to discuss some important changes regarding the royal stables. As you know, maintaining such an extensive collection of horses requires enormous resources, and we're implementing cost-cutting measures across all royal properties." Morrison's jaw tightened as he listened, already sensing where this conversation was heading. His eyes moved between Camilla and her son, noting the nervous energy radiating from Tom Parker Bowles. The young man seemed uncomfortable, constantly shifting his weight and avoiding direct eye contact with the seasoned guard captain. "There's a particular horse," Camilla continued, consulting her papers, a chestnut mare named Duchess. We understand she was quite special to the late Queen, but practical considerations must take precedence now. My son Tom has always been passionate about equestrian activities, and we believe Duchess would thrive in a more active environment at his private estate. The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. For a moment he struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. The Queen's most treasured companion, the horse she had personally entrusted to his care, was being casually reassigned as though she were merely another piece of royal property to be redistributed at will. "Your Majesty," Morrison began carefully, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging within him. "With the greatest respect, Queen Elizabeth specifically requested that Duchess remain at Windsor Castle. She made me personally promise to ensure the mare's care and comfort here, in familiar surroundings." Camilla's expression hardened, clearly not accustomed to having her decisions questioned by staff members. "Captain Morrison, I appreciate your dedication to the previous monarch's wishes, but circumstances have changed. The Crown must adapt to modern realities, and that includes making difficult decisions about resource allocation." Tom Parker Bowles finally spoke up, his voice lacking conviction. "I want to assure you, Captain, that Duchess will receive excellent care at my estate. I have proper facilities and experienced staff. Perhaps this change will actually benefit her, giving her more attention and activity than she might receive here." Morrison studied the younger man's face, searching for any sign of genuine concern for the horse's welfare. What he saw instead was barely concealed eagerness, the look of someone who had been promised something valuable and was anxious to claim it. The realization that Duchess was being treated as a prize rather than a beloved companion made Morrison's blood boil. "Sir?" Morrison addressed Tom directly. "Duchess is not just any horse. She's elderly, set in her routines, and deeply attached to this place. Moving her would cause tremendous stress and could seriously impact her health and well-being." Camilla's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Captain Morrison, this decision has already been made. Tom will take possession of Duchess tomorrow morning. I trust you'll ensure the transfer goes smoothly and professionally." The finality in her tone made it clear that she considered the matter closed. Morrison felt a cold rage building within him, but years of military discipline kept his expression neutral. However, inside his mind, he was already formulating plans. He had made a sacred promise to a dying queen, and no earthly power would force him to break that vow. As Morrison left the study, he knew his comfortable life as a loyal servant was about to end. The battle lines had been drawn, and he found himself on one side while the most powerful people in the kingdom stood firmly on the other. The real fight was just beginning. That evening, Morrison sat alone in his modest quarters staring at a framed photograph of Queen Elizabeth mounted on Duchess during happier times. The image captured a moment of pure joy, with the elderly monarch's face glowing with contentment as Duchess stood proudly beneath her. It was a reminder of what he was fighting to protect, not just a horse but a legacy of love and devotion. Morrison's mind raced through his limited options. Direct confrontation had failed, and going through official channels would likely prove futile given Camilla's obvious determination. However, his years of service had taught him that sometimes the most effective battles were fought away from the official spotlight, using knowledge and connections that others might overlook. He pulled out his secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. Sarah Collins, a respected royal correspondent for The Guardian, answered on the second ring. Morrison had helped her with several stories over the years, always maintaining proper discretion while ensuring the public understood the human side of royal life. "Sarah, it's James Morrison from Windsor. I need to speak with you about something urgent, but not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at the old oak tree near the castle's east gate?" Sarah immediately detected the gravity in Morrison's voice. As one of the most trusted royal correspondents, she had developed an instinct for sensing when significant stories were developing. "Of course, James, is everything all right? Let's just say that some decisions are being made that would break the late Queen's heart if she were still with us. I'll explain everything tomorrow." After ending the call, Morrison made his way back to the stables for what might be his final evening with Duchess. The mare seemed to sense his distress, nuzzling against his shoulder as he gently stroked her neck. In the quiet darkness, he whispered his plans to her, explaining that he would do everything in his power to keep her safe and honored. "I won't let them treat you like a piece of furniture to be moved around," he murmured. The Queen trusted me to protect you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, even if it costs me my job." Meanwhile, in the castle's main wing, Tom Parker Bowles was on the phone with his friends, excitedly describing his upcoming acquisition. His conversation revealed disturbing details about his true intentions for Duchess. Rather than providing a loving retirement home, he was already discussing potential breeding programs and even the possibility of selling offspring for substantial profits. "You should see this horse," Tom bragged to his caller. "She's got incredible bloodlines, and Mother says she's mine now. I'm thinking we could set up a whole operation around her. Royal breeding stock is worth a fortune these days." These words, overheard by a young castle maid named Emma, who was cleaning nearby, would soon find their way to Morrison through the informal network of staff communication that existed throughout the royal household. When Emma quietly shared what she had heard, Morrison felt his resolve harden into something approaching steel. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Morrison's mood as he prepared for his meeting with Sarah Collins. He had spent the night documenting everything he could remember about the Queen's relationship with Duchess, gathering photographs and written records that might help tell the story properly. As he walked toward the meeting point, Morrison caught sight of a horse trailer being positioned near the stables. His heart sank as he realized that Tom Parker Bowles was already making preparations to remove Duchess. The timeline was accelerating, and Morrison knew he had only hours to prevent what he saw as a betrayal of everything the royal family should represent. Sarah Collins was already waiting beneath the ancient oak tree, her notebook ready and her expression serious. She had covered the royal family for over a decade, but she had never seen Morrison look so troubled or determined. "James," she said quietly, "tell me what's happening." Morrison took a deep breath and began to speak, knowing that once he shared this story, there would be no turning back. He was about to challenge the crown itself, armed with nothing but his conscience and a promise made to a dying queen. The fate of Duchess, and perhaps his own future, would soon rest in the court of public opinion. Sarah Collins listened in stunned silence as Morrison detailed the events of the previous day. Her experienced journalist's mind immediately grasped the significance of what she was hearing. This wasn't just a story about a horse. It was about respect for the late Queen's memory, the treatment of loyal staff, and the very character of the new royal administration. "James, are you absolutely certain about Tom Parker Bowles' intentions regarding breeding and profit?" Sarah asked, her pen moving rapidly across her notebook. Morrison nodded grimly. "Emma heard every word. She's worked in the castle for 8 years, and has never lied about anything. Tom sees Duchess as a business opportunity, not as the beloved companion the Queen intended her to remain." Sarah's expression grew increasingly serious as she processed the implications. "You understand what you're risking by coming to me with this story? Your career, your pension, potentially your entire future?" "I've thought about nothing else all night," Morrison replied. "But I made a promise to a dying monarch. That promise means more to me than my own comfort or security. If speaking the truth costs me everything, then so be it." As they spoke, Sarah's phone buzzed with an urgent message from her editor. Word was already circulating through palace channels that something significant was developing. The royal press office had apparently begun making preemptive calls to major news outlets, attempting to control whatever narrative might emerge. "They're already trying to manage this story," Sarah observed, showing Morrison the message. "That tells me they know how bad this looks. The question is whether we can get the truth out before they spin it into something else entirely." Morrison checked his watch and realized that Duchess's removal was scheduled to begin within the hour. "Sarah, I need to get back. Whatever you're going to do, it has to happen quickly. Once they move her off the grounds, it becomes much harder to reverse this decision." Sarah was already on her phone, calling her editor with details of the developing story. The Guardian's royal coverage team swung into action, understanding that they had stumbled onto a story that could significantly impact public perception of the new monarchy. As Morrison hurried back toward the castle, he was intercepted by Deputy Head of Security Marcus Webb, a man Morrison had trained and mentored over the years. Webb's expression was troubled, and he spoke in urgent, hushed tones. "James, I've been looking for you everywhere. There are orders from the top to have you removed from stable duty immediately. They want you reassigned to perimeter patrol effective right now." Morrison felt his heart sink. They were isolating him from Duchess, making it impossible for him to interfere with the transfer. "Marcus, you know this is wrong. You've seen how much that horse meant to the Queen. Webb nodded reluctantly. I know, but I have my orders. I'm sorry, James. If you refuse the reassignment, they'll have grounds to suspend you entirely. The two men stood in the courtyard, both understanding the impossible position they were in. Webb was torn between loyalty to his mentor and obedience to his superiors. Morrison realized that his time for direct action was running out rapidly. Give me 5 minutes, Morrison pleaded. Just 5 minutes to say goodbye to Duchess. After everything I've done for this family, surely I've earned that much. Webb glanced around nervously, then nodded. 5 minutes, James, but after that I have to enforce the orders. Morrison ran toward the stables, his mind racing with possibilities. As he approached Duchess's stall, he could see Tom Parker Bowles directing stable hands to prepare the mare for transport. The young man was treating the situation like a business transaction, showing no awareness of the emotional significance of what was happening. Careful with her, Tom called out. I don't want any damage to my investment. Those words struck Morrison like a physical blow. Investment. That's all Duchess represented to this man, a valuable asset to be exploited rather than a cherished companion to be honored. In that moment, Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of his years of service. Stop right there. This transfer is not happening today. Tom Parker Bowles turned, his face flushing with anger and surprise. Who do you think you are? You have no authority to interfere with royal decisions. Morrison stood his ground, feeling the weight of history and duty settling on his shoulders. I am the guardian appointed by Queen Elizabeth herself to protect this horse. And I'm telling you that Duchess is not leaving these grounds. The confrontation that had been building for hours was finally beginning, and Morrison knew there was no turning back now. The stable yard fell silent except for the nervous stamping of horses who sensed the mounting tension. Tom Parker Bowles' face grew red with indignation as he processed Morrison's defiant stance. Several stable hands stopped their work, uncertain whether to continue loading equipment or step back from what was clearly becoming a serious confrontation. You're completely out of line, Tom snapped, pulling out his phone. I'm calling Mother immediately. You'll be lucky if you're not arrested for insubordination. Morrison remained calm, his years of military training serving him well in this moment of crisis. Call whoever you need to call. But understand this. I made a sacred promise to your stepfather's mother, and I won't break that promise for anyone. As Tom frantically dialed his mother's number, Morrison noticed movement near the castle entrance. Sarah Collins had positioned herself strategically with a photographer, documenting the entire confrontation. The story was already beginning to unfold in real time, and Morrison felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that whatever happened next would not occur in darkness or secrecy. Within minutes, Queen Camilla arrived at the stables, flanked by 2 senior royal advisors and looking absolutely furious. Her usual composure had been replaced by barely controlled rage as she strode directly toward Morrison. Captain Morrison, she said, her voice ice-cold, you are relieved of all duties, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises within the hour. Morrison stood at attention, meeting her gaze without flinching. Your Majesty, I respectfully request that you reconsider this decision. Queen Elizabeth specifically entrusted Duchess to my care, and I cannot in good conscience abandon that responsibility. The late Queen is no longer making decisions here, Camilla replied sharply. I am, and I've decided that this horse will go to my son where she'll receive proper care and attention. With respect, Your Majesty, your son has already made it clear that he views Duchess as a business investment for breeding purposes. That was never Queen Elizabeth's intention. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Tom Parker Bowles stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. That's a complete lie. I would never treat a royal horse with anything but the utmost respect. Morrison's expression remained steady. Then you won't mind explaining to the press why you were discussing breeding programs and profit margins with your friends just last night. The color drained from Tom's face as he realized his private conversations had been overheard. Camilla's advisors exchanged worried glances, clearly understanding that this confrontation was spiraling beyond their control. This conversation is over, Camilla declared. Morrison, you're fired. Security will remove you immediately, and if you attempt to interfere further, we'll have you arrested for trespassing. At that moment, Marcus Webb appeared with 2 other security officers, his expression pained as he approached his former mentor. James, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to come with us. Morrison looked around the stable yard one final time, his gaze lingering on Duchess, who seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. The mare stood quietly in her stall, her dark eyes reflecting an almost human understanding of the turmoil surrounding her. "I'll go peacefully," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the yard, "but I want everyone here to understand what's really happening. A dying queen's last wish is being ignored so that her step-grandson can turn her beloved companion into a money-making scheme." As security began to escort Morrison away, Sarah Collins stepped forward with her photographer. "Your Majesty, would you care to comment on Captain Morrison's allegations regarding your son's intentions for the Queen's horse?" Camilla's face went white with fury as she realized the confrontation had been witnessed and documented by the press. "No comment. This is a private family matter. Is it true that Queen Elizabeth specifically requested that Duchess remain at Windsor Castle?" Sarah pressed. "No further questions," one of Camilla's advisors interjected, quickly ushering the Queen away from the growing crowd of reporters who had begun arriving at the scene. As Morrison was led away from the stables, he could hear the excited chatter of journalists gathering information and the nervous whinnying of horses disturbed by the commotion. He had thrown down the gauntlet against the crown itself, and now the battle would be fought in the arena of public opinion. Behind him, Tom Parker Bowles stood beside the horse trailer, uncertain whether to proceed with the transfer or wait for the media storm to pass. The simple task of moving a horse had become a public relations nightmare, and the young man was beginning to understand the true cost of challenging a devoted guardian's promise to a beloved queen. By evening, Morrison's confrontation with Queen Camilla had exploded across British media. The Guardian's headline read, "Royal Guard fired for protecting Queen's beloved horse," while social media platforms buzzed with outrage over what many saw as a betrayal of Elizabeth's memory. Photographs of Morrison being escorted away from the stables appeared on front pages across the nation. Morrison sat in his small flat outside Windsor, watching the coverage unfold on television. His phone rang constantly with interview requests from journalists, documentary makers, and even several members of Parliament who wanted to understand the full story. For the first time in his adult life, he was no longer bound by the strict confidentiality requirements of royal service. The public reaction was swift and overwhelmingly supportive of Morrison's stand. Social media campaigns emerged with hashtags like "Save Duchess" and "Honor the Queen," while online petitions demanding the horse remain at Windsor gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures within hours. The royal family found themselves facing their first major public relations crisis under the new monarchy. Meanwhile, inside Windsor Castle, emergency meetings were being held to address the growing scandal. King Charles, who had been traveling during the initial confrontation, returned to find his household in chaos and his wife at the center of a media firestorm that threatened to damage the monarchy's reputation. "How did this happen?" Charles demanded during a heated discussion with his advisors. "A simple administrative decision about a horse has turned into a constitutional crisis." Camilla defended her position stubbornly. "We cannot allow staff members to dictate royal policy. If we back down now, it sets a dangerous precedent for future challenges to our authority." However, the king's private secretary presented polling data that painted a grim picture. Public approval ratings for the new monarchy were plummeting, with many Britons expressing feeling that Camilla was disrespecting Elizabeth's memory. The numbers were particularly devastating among older voters who had cherished the late queen. Tom Parker Bowles, meanwhile, found himself thrust unwillingly into the spotlight. Investigative journalists had uncovered his business dealings and previous comments about monetizing royal connections. His plans for Duchess were being dissected in painful detail, revealing a pattern of behavior that many found deeply troubling. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Tom told his mother during a private conversation. "Maybe we should just leave the horse where it is and move on." But Camilla remained determined not to appear weak or indecisive. "Absolutely not. We've made our decision and we're sticking to it. This will blow over once people move on to the next story." Her assessment proved catastrophically wrong. Instead of fading, the story gained momentum as more details emerged about Morrison's exemplary service record and his close relationship with Queen Elizabeth. Former colleagues stepped forward to share stories of Morrison's dedication, painting a picture of a man who had devoted his life to protecting the royal family. The breakthrough came when Princess Anne, known for her direct manner and love of horses, issued a carefully worded public statement. While not directly criticizing her sister-in-law, she praised Morrison's unwavering dedication to my mother's wishes and suggested that all decisions regarding the Queen's beloved animals should reflect her known desires and values. This indirect but clear rebuke from within the royal family itself sent shockwaves through the establishment. Anne's statement was seen as lending credibility to Morrison's position and undermining Camilla's authority on the matter. Public demonstrations began appearing outside royal properties, with protesters carrying signs reading, "Respect the Queen's wishes and Duchess belongs at Windsor." The demonstrations were peaceful but persistent, creating daily reminders of the controversy for anyone entering or leaving royal grounds. Morrison received unexpected support from military veterans organizations, who viewed his stance as a matter of honor and duty. Former soldiers understood the weight of promises made to dying comrades and respected Morrison's refusal to abandon his commitment regardless of personal cost. The pressure on the royal household intensified when several major donors to royal charities privately expressed concern about the controversy. The threat of financial consequences began to weigh heavily on advisors who had initially supported Camilla's firm stance. As the crisis entered its second week, even international media began covering the story. The image of Britain's new monarchy being challenged by a loyal servant protecting a horse became a symbol of larger questions about tradition, respect, and the character of leadership. Morrison, despite his dismissal, continued to speak publicly about his promise to Queen Elizabeth. His dignity and consistency in the face of royal displeasure won him admiration from across the political spectrum, transforming him from an unknown guard into an unlikely national hero standing up for principle against power. 3 weeks after the confrontation that changed everything, King Charles made an unprecedented decision. In a private meeting with his closest advisors, he acknowledged that the crisis had grown beyond acceptable limits and was threatening to overshadow the early months of his reign with unnecessary controversy. "We need to find a way forward that honors both my mother's memory and the dignity of the crown," Charles declared. "This situation has gone on far too long and is causing real damage to our reputation." The king's intervention came after a particularly damaging television interview where Morrison, with quiet dignity, shared previously unknown details about Queen Elizabeth's final months and her deep concern for Duchess's future welfare. The interview, watched by over 12 million Britons, had moved many viewers to tears and intensified pressure for a resolution. Charles personally requested a meeting with Morrison, much to Camilla's displeasure. The meeting took place in a private study at Clarence House, away from the media scrutiny that had surrounded every development in the case. "Captain Morrison," the king began, "I want to personally acknowledge your years of dedicated service to my mother and to our family. Your loyalty and commitment have never been in question." Morrison sat respectfully, uncertain about where the conversation was heading, but hopeful that reason might finally prevail. "I've made a decision," Charles continued. "Duchess will remain at Windsor Castle for the remainder of her natural life. Furthermore, I'm creating a new position for you as guardian of the Queen's memorial horses, with full authority over their care and placement." The relief that washed over Morrison was immediate and overwhelming. "Your Majesty, I cannot express how grateful I am for this decision. It honors your mother's memory in exactly the way she would have wanted." Charles nodded solemnly. "My mother valued loyalty above almost everything else. Your willingness to risk everything to honor your promise to her demonstrates the kind of character she most admired." The announcement was made public that afternoon through an official royal statement. The news was greeted with widespread celebration, as public opinion had firmly sided with Morrison throughout the crisis. Social media exploded with messages of support and relief that common sense and respect for tradition had ultimately prevailed. Tom Parker Bowles quietly withdrew from public view, his reputation severely damaged by revelations about his business intentions. Sources close to the family suggested he had been strongly advised to pursue other interests and avoid any further involvement with royal horses. Camilla, faced with the king's direct intervention, had no choice but to accept the decision gracefully. In a brief public statement, she expressed support for her husband's choice and claimed that the welfare of the animals had always been her primary concern. Morrison returned to Windsor Castle 3 days later, welcomed by cheering staff members and a media presence documenting his vindication. As he walked back into the stables for the first time since his dismissal, Duchess seemed to recognize him immediately, approaching the gate of her stall with what observers described as obvious joy and relief. "Hello, old girl," Morrison whispered, gently stroking the mare's neck. "I told you I wouldn't let you down." The Guardian Sarah Collins, who had broken the original story, was granted exclusive access to document Morrison's return. Her final article in the series described a man who had risked everything for principle and emerged victorious, becoming an unlikely symbol of integrity in an age of compromise. Public polling showed that the resolution of the crisis had actually improved overall opinion of King Charles, with many Britons appreciating his willingness to correct a mistake and honor his mother's wishes. The monarchy had emerged from its first major test with its reputation intact, though questions about Camilla's judgment lingered in some quarters. Morrison settled back into his duties with renewed purpose, knowing that his stand had not only protected Duchess but had also sent a clear message about the importance of keeping promises and respecting the wishes of those who came before. The memorial horses under his care became a living tribute to Queen Elizabeth's love of the animals that had brought her such joy throughout her remarkable life. In the quiet moments of early morning rounds, Morrison often paused to watch Duchess grazing peacefully in the familiar surroundings she had shared with her beloved queen. The crisis that had threatened to uproot everything she knew had passed, and the promise made to a dying monarch had been kept against all odds. For Morrison, no victory could have been more meaningful or complete.